Hello, this is the 34th lecture on Revelation and World History. Up until last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in actual history. The number, 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. However, it was precisely during this period, on April 15, 1912, that Kim Il-sung was born. He was responsible for the complete annihilation of the North Korean Church, once hailed as the Jerusalem of the East. In this lecture, we will explore the geographical characteristics of the Korean Peninsula, the place where prophecy is fulfilled. Revelation and World History, Chapter 5, Eastern Jerusalem and the Korean Peninsula. Section 1, Geographical Characteristics of Israel. Zechariah chapter 14. Verse 1, The day of the Lord will come, and your wealth will be plundered and divided among you. And your wealth will be plundered and divided among you. Verse 2, I will gather the nations to fight against Jerusalem. The city will be taken, its houses plundered, and half its people taken captive. Verse 3, Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as he did in the day of battle. Verse 4, On that day, the feet of the Lord will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. The Mount of Olives will split in its middle from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain will move toward the north, and half toward the south. Verse 5, The valley of the mountains will reach to Asher. You will flee through the valley of the mountains, as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah. Verse 6, In that day, there will be no light, and the bright things will flee away. Verse 7, There will be a day, known to the Lord, neither day nor night. When darkness falls there will be light. Verse 8, On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it to the eastern sea, and half of it to the western sea. It will be the same in summer and winter. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 1 to 8. The book of Zechariah contains a description of the geographical features of the place where the prophecy will be fulfilled, at the end of time, when prophecy is fulfilled. On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half toward the eastern sea, and half toward the western sea. In summer and in winter. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 8. According to the text, on that day, as God has predestined, a spring will flow out from Jerusalem, forming a river, half toward the eastern sea, and half toward the western sea. The German Bible Society's Annotated Bible interprets the East Sea as the Dead Sea, east of Jerusalem, and the West Sea as the Mediterranean Sea, west of Israel. We referred to the commentary on Zechariah chapter 14, verse 8, in the Commentary Bible published by the German Bible Society. Half flowing to the East Sea, and half flowing to the West Sea, means that a single point serves as the source of a river, dividing it into east and west. Currently, no river originates in Jerusalem and flows into the Mediterranean. Therefore, there is a tendency to interpret this verse as referring to a spiritual characteristic, rather than a geographical one. In other words, spiritually, it expresses that the living water of the Holy Spirit will overflow, and you will receive spiritual blessings. We referred to Pastor Lee Sang-kun's commentary on the Book of Minor Prophets. However, this passage reveals the geographical location of Israel as the site of prophecy fulfillment. Many terms, appearing in the prophetic books, tend to be interpreted as spiritual symbols. However, in some cases, the words are not symbols, but rather depict literal scenes. Zechariah chapter 14 is one such example. When Babylon, described in the prophetic text, is fulfilled in actual history, there is a name for the country corresponding to that Babylon. Similarly, when Israel appears in the prophetic books, we must recognize that there is another country corresponding to that Israel. Already earlier, in the lecture of chapter 4 of Revelation and World History, we explained that the Korean Peninsula is the land of the rising sun in the east, from which 144,000 people come. This passage from Zechariah also identifies the future Jerusalem, Israel, the historical site where all the prophecies of the book will be fulfilled. The term living water does not refer to water that flows down from accumulated rainwater, but rather to spring water that wells up from the ground. Many rivers on earth originate from small springs. For example, in China, the source of the Yellow River, known as the Mother River, is the Karakou River, which originates north of Mount Gazaigia, a spur of Mount Bayankala. The Karakou River is formed by the convergence of several springs that flow from the mountain at an elevation of 4,830 meters. Another example is when melting snow or glaciers in highlands, like the Himalayas, form rivers. This passage states that living water will overflow, meaning that spring water will rise and become the source of a river. And it also states that the source of the spring water will be the source of two rivers. We need to find a river that flows from the same source, half to the East Sea and half to the West Sea. We already explained in chapter 4, section 3 that the land of the rising sun is the Korean Peninsula. So, we must first examine the Korean Peninsula's topography. If we look for a place where two rivers originate from the same mountain, Tae-bek, in Gangwon Province, is a prime example. Among the major rivers that cross the Korean Peninsula, the Han River and the Nakdong River originate in Tae-bek. However, the Han River flows to the West Sea, while the Nakdong River flows to the South Sea, not the East Sea. The Han River's source, according to the National Geographic Information Institute, is Kumyong-so, in Cheongjuk-dong, Tae-bek, where 2,000 tons of water gushes out daily. The Nakdong River's source is Wangji Pond, in downtown Tae-bek. Although the two rivers originate in similar areas, they do not begin at the same point. Furthermore, the Nakdong River flows not to the East Sea, but to the South Sea, contradicting the text's description of half flowing to the East Sea. We need to find a river where both rivers originate from the same location, one flowing to the East Sea, and the other to the West Sea. Is such a place possible? Anyone familiar with Korean geography will recognize the phrase, a river that flows half to the East Sea, and half to the West Sea. They are the Amnok River and the Duman River. Both rivers originate from the same source, Chunji Pond on Baekdu Mountain. Of the two rivers that originate from the same source, one is the Amnok River, which flows into the West Sea. Another one is the Duman River, which flows into the East Sea. The names of the seas have also been used for generations, East Sea and West Sea. The water of Baekdusan's Chunji Pond primarily consists of rainwater, but its source is underground spring water. The groundwater supply accounts for approximately 61.5% of the total water supply to Chunji Pond. We referred to Sim Hae Suk's overview of Baekdu Mountain. While many ponds formed in volcanic craters around the world, Chunji Pond on Baekdu Mountain is a unique lake, fed by an underground spring. Hala Mountain on Jeju Island also has Baek Nok Dam, a volcanic crater. This lake dries up when there is no rain. However, when it rains, water accumulates for a while and forms a lake. However, water flows from Chunji Pond on Baekdu Mountain year-round. Because of this, the water from the waterfall, flowing from the peak of Baekdu Mountain never freezes, even in winter. This is because the spring water constantly gushes forth from the bottom of Baekdu Mountain's Chunji Lake. We referred to Sim Hae Suk's overview of Baekdu Mountain. It will be so in summer and winter. The river that originates from the peak of Baekdu Mountain flows without drying up, year-round, summer and winter. What is truly remarkable is that God, in the prophetic books, not only describes the content of the prophecies, but also the geographical features of the places where they are fulfilled. The Book of Revelation and the prophetic books describe the place where prophecy is fulfilled as the east where the sun rises. This prophecy is being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, a place located in the east where the sun rises. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 8, describes the geographical characteristics of the place where this prophecy is fulfilled. It states that a spring will flow from a single place, becoming the source of two rivers, half flowing to the East Sea and half flowing to the West Sea. That is the Amnok and Duman rivers, which originate from the Chunji Pond on Baekdu Mountain. Not only is the historical context for the fulfillment of the prophecy mentioned, but the geographical characteristics of the place are also mentioned. In the next lecture, we will explore the land divided by rivers. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history.